inside a classified hangar, there may already be an aircraft that can reach any city on Earth in under 90 minutes, drop a strike from the edge of space, and land back on a runway before the enemy even confirms what hit them. No government has officially acknowledged it. No journalist has photographed it. And yet China and Iran are restructuring their entire air defense doctrine around the possibility that it's real. That's not speculation dressed up as news. That's the logical conclusion of a pattern that Skunk Works has been running for decades, and it's a pattern worth paying close attention to. What we're talking about is a program that circulated in defense analyst circles under the name Phantom Wing, a black project allegedly developed inside Lockheed's most secretive division, built to operate at the boundary where atmosphere ends and orbit begins, and designed to strike from a domain that no adversary currently has any answer for. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why this aircraft, if it exists, doesn't just change the speed of warfare, it changes the entire math adversaries use when they think about confronting the United States. We're going to cover where this program allegedly came from, how orbital strike actually works, why neither China nor Iran can stop it, and what's real versus what's still in the rumor layer. Let's get into it. The SR-71 Blackbird was officially retired in 1998. For 25 years, it held the record as the fastest air-breathing aircraft ever flown, capable of outrunning surface-to-air missiles simply by accelerating away from them. When the Air Force stood those airframes down, the public story was that satellites had made high-speed reconnaissance redundant, cheaper, safer, no pilot at risk. Lockheed accepted that narrative publicly and kept working privately. That's not a conspiracy framing. That's just what Skunk Works does. The division was built by Kelly Johnson in the 1940s specifically to work outside normal bureaucratic visibility, and every major platform it's produced followed the same arc. Something gets developed in secret, flies operationally for years, and only surfaces publicly when the program has moved far enough along that disclosure, no longer compromises it. The F-117 Nighthawk is the cleanest example. It flew its first operational mission years before the Pentagon acknowledged the aircraft existed. Neighbors near Tonopah Test Range in Nevada were seeing a delta-shaped aircraft in the sky throughout the early 1980s. The official confirmation didn't come until 1988. By that point, the aircraft had already been combat-ready for years. The B-2 Spirit followed the same pattern. The SR-72 followed it too, except in that case, Lockheed themselves broke the silence. In 2013, they published a concept article in Aviation Week describing a hypersonic successor to the Blackbird, targeting Mach 6, built around a combined cycle engine that could handle both subsonic and scramjet regime flight. The reason they disclosed it wasn't because the program was new. It was because the underlying propulsion technology had matured enough that keeping it completely dark was no longer the point. What matters about the SR-72 disclosure is what it implies. Lockheed went public with a Mach 6 reconnaissance and strike aircraft in 2013, which means the development timeline for that system stretches back well before that. And since 2013, Skunk Works has gone almost completely quiet on where that program stands today. That silence is meaningful. The Phantom Wing concept, as it's circulated among defense analysts and in patent filings tied to advanced propulsion and thermal protection systems, isn't described as a faster version of the SR-72. It's described as a categorically different kind of aircraft, not a hypersonic jet that flies through the upper atmosphere at high speed. Something that climbs above the atmosphere entirely, uses low orbital mechanics to cover distance, and then descends on a target from above at hypersonic velocity during re-entry. That's a different machine. It operates in a different domain. And the defenses that exist to stop conventional aircraft, or even conventional hypersonic missiles, weren't built with this flight profile in mind. To understand why that matters so much, you need to understand what orbital strike actually means mechanically, and why the physics of it are so difficult to defend against. Think about a standard strike mission. An aircraft takes off, flies through the atmosphere at some altitude, crosses into hostile airspace, releases a weapon, and exits. The entire flight path stays inside the same layer of air that weather systems move through. That's the domain every air defense network on Earth is designed to cover. Orbital strike works on completely different geometry. The aircraft climbs steeply after takeoff, burns through the upper atmosphere, and crosses into the region where air is too thin to generate conventional lift. At that altitude, the curvature of the Earth itself becomes the flight path. The aircraft isn't flying over the planet so much as it's arcing around it, using near-orbital mechanics to cover thousands of miles in a fraction of the time any conventional aircraft could manage. Then it pitches down, bleeds velocity through re-entry, and descends on the target from almost directly above. That descent profile is where the 90-minute global reach number comes from. At hypersonic re-entry speeds, the distance between a launch point in the continental United States and a target on the other side of the world stops being measured in hours. It's measured in the time it takes to arc through low orbit and come back down. The physics behind this aren't theoretical. China's DFZF hypersonic glide vehicle uses a related principle. Boost a warhead to extreme altitude and velocity, then let it glide and maneuver during descent rather than following a ballistic arc. The phantom wing concept, as described by analysts tracking the program, takes that same logic and applies it to a reusable crewed or semi-crewed platform. Not a missile you fire once. A vehicle that returns to base, gets serviced, and flies again. Getting there requires solving one of the hardest problems in aerospace engineering: transitioning an aircraft from conventional turbine flight at low speed through the transonic and supersonic regimes all the way to Mach 6 and beyond demands an engine that can function across that entire range without stalling, melting, or losing thrust at the worst possible moment. Scramjet engines only ignite efficiently above roughly Mach 4, which means the propulsion system has to bridge that gap. A combined cycle engine starts as a turbine, accelerates the aircraft to the speed where scramjet combustion becomes viable, then transitions cleanly to hypersonic mode. Lockheed's work on this problem goes back years, and the SR-72 program was built around making that transition reliable enough to be operational rather than experimental. Once the aircraft is above the atmosphere and descending, something interesting happens with stealth. At the speeds involved during re-entry, friction with the upper atmosphere generates a plasma sheath around the airframe. That layer of ionized gas absorbs radar energy rather than reflecting it back to a ground station. Conventional stealth coatings work by shaping the aircraft to scatter radar returns. The plasma effect works by swallowing the signal entirely. The aircraft is, in practical terms, invisible to ground-based radar during the exact phase of flight when it's most dangerous. The X-37B program adds another layer to this. The Air Force's unmanned spaceplane has been flying classified orbital missions for years, with individual sorties lasting many months. The official explanation covers technology demonstration in a general sense, but several defense analysts have noted that the vehicle's flight profile, its re-entry characteristics, and the thermal protection systems it uses are all directly applicable to a crewed or strike-capable successor. Whether the X-37B is a direct ancestor of something like the Phantom Wing, or simply a parallel program solving overlapping problems, the technology it's validating maps cleanly onto what an orbital strike aircraft would need to survive and function. That gets at why China and Iran aren't just watching this program with curiosity. They're watching it with urgency, because the defense gap it creates isn't something either country currently has any real answer to. China's most capable ground-based air defense network is built around systems like the HQ-9 and its naval equivalents. These are serious, modern platforms. They can engage targets at long range, they're mobile, and they're designed to handle multiple threats simultaneously. Against a conventional strike package, they'd cause real problems. The word conventional is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Every air defense system ever fielded is fundamentally a solution to a geometry problem. A radar acquisition system scans a defined volume of airspace, detects a target moving through it, hands off tracking data to a fire control system, and that system calculates an intercept trajectory and launches. The whole chain depends on one assumption: that the threat is coming from a direction and altitude the radar was designed to watch, with enough time in the engagement envelope to actually intercept it. An orbital strike aircraft breaks every variable in that chain at once. The descent profile we covered earlier means the threat arrives from almost directly overhead, not from the horizon where most radar apertures are optimized to look. The angle alone creates a detection problem that no software patch fixes because it's baked into the physical orientation of the antenna arrays. To cover orbital re-entry angles, you'd need a fundamentally different sensor architecture pointed at the sky rather than the horizon, networked with fire control systems fast enough to generate an intercept solution in an extremely compressed window. That window is roughly 90 seconds or less from initial detection to impact, assuming the radar can acquire the target at all through the plasma sheath effect. 90 seconds is not enough time for any currently fielded intercept system to run a full engagement sequence against a maneuvering hypersonic vehicle descending from near orbital altitude. The missile has to be in the air before the geometry becomes workable, and you can't do that if you don't know the target is coming. Iran's situation is considerably more exposed. Their air defense inventory leans heavily on Russian origin systems, some of which date back decades. These aren't platforms designed to engage targets moving at hypersonic speeds under any geometry, let alone the near-vertical descent profile orbital strike produces. During the strikes attributed to Israel in recent years, Iranian systems struggled to consistently engage much slower, much lower-flying threats. The gap between what they operate and what an orbital strike aircraft represents isn't a gap you close with training or tactics. There's a psychological layer here too, and it matters as much as the technical one. Conventional deterrence works because both sides can see each other's capabilities developing in real time. Satellites track airfield construction, analysts count aircraft tail numbers, intelligence services monitor production rates. That visibility allows adversaries to calibrate their posture. They can assess the threat, build a response, and communicate that response as a deterrent of their own. An aircraft that can loiter in orbit for extended periods and descend without warning removes that visibility entirely. There's no ingress track to detect, no tanker support to monitor, no pre-flight activity to tip off intelligence collection. The first indication that a strike is happening could be the strike itself. Ballistic missiles follow a predictable arc from launch to impact, and that predictability is actually one of their weaknesses from a deterrent standpoint. Terminal defense systems have known intercept geometries to work with. A vehicle that maneuvers during descent on a profile that originates above the atmosphere doesn't give interceptors a predictable arc to solve for. That's not a marginal improvement in survivability. That's operating in a domain where the intercept math doesn't currently exist. So let's be straight about where the line sits between confirmed and alleged, because they're not the same thing, and collapsing them doesn't serve anyone. What's confirmed, the SR-72 program is real, Lockheed said so publicly. Skunk Works operates on black budget funding that's documented in congressional appropriations history. The X-37B is flying right now, somewhere above your head on a mission the Air Force hasn't fully explained. The physics of orbital re-entry and plasma stealth aren't classified. They're published aerospace science. Those things are facts. The Phantom Wing name isn't. The specific capability claims aren't. What circulates in defense analyst communities is a composite assembled from patent filings on advanced thermal protection and combined cycle propulsion, from signals intelligence reporting that's never been officially sourced, and from the kind of inference that happens when people who track black programs for a living notice line items in the Pentagon's budget that don't match anything on the acknowledged aircraft list. That's not nothing. It's also not a confirmed program. Here's why the Pentagon might not mind that ambiguity existing. An adversary that believes this aircraft is already operational has to plan for it. They have to spend money on detection architecture they don't currently have. They have to redesign missile defense doctrine around a threat profile their engineers are still trying to model. They have to absorb the psychological weight of knowing there may be a weapon in their opponent's inventory they have no answer for. All of that happens whether or not the platform has actually completed its first operational flight. Strategic ambiguity isn't a side effect of secrecy. Sometimes it's the product. The budget signal points in one direction. Unacknowledged special access programs have consumed a growing share of U.S. defense spending over the past decade, and the gap between total black budget allocation and the programs analysts can account for by name has widened. Something is absorbing that money. Multiple somethings, probably, and the historical pattern keeps repeating. The F-117 was a rumor, then a fact. The B-2 was a rumor, then a fact. The SAR-72 itself was analyst speculation until Lockheed published it. Every one of those programs followed the same arc: denial, silence, then confirmation after the technology was mature enough that disclosure cost nothing strategically. Nobody outside the program knew the truth until Skunk Works decided they could afford to share it. That's exactly where the Phantom Wing sits right now. Either it's already flying and we're in the silence phase, or it's close enough that the rumors are doing useful work in the meantime. Both possibilities produce the same outcome for China and Iran. Whether the Phantom Wing is airborne tonight or still years from its first flight, the gap it represents is already reshaping how adversaries think and spend. The US government has officially admitted it cannot explain what its own Navy pilots recorded on radar and infrared camera. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's a congressional hearing on record with decorated aviators testifying under oath. Now here's the part nobody's talking about. While those hearings were happening, a patent was sitting in the public USPTO database, filed by an aerospace engineer working for the US Navy, describing almost exactly how those objects would work. The patent is called Craft Using an Inertial Mass Reduction Device. You can search it right now. It's not classified, it's not hidden, it's just sitting there, written in engineering language, waiting for someone to read it. That's what this video is about. We're going to walk through three things: the patents themselves, the classified test ranges where something would have to be flown, and the physics that says this isn't pure fiction. By the end, you won't need to take anyone's word for any of it, because every piece of this paper trail is public and searchable. The gap between what the public knows and what's already been built and tested may be wider than you think. Most aerospace patents are boring. They describe a new wing profile, a more efficient turbine blade geometry, a lighter landing gear strut. They're incremental improvements on systems that have existed for decades, and they read like what they are: engineering refinements. Craft Using an Inertial Mass Reduction Device doesn't read like that. The patent, filed by Dr. Salvatore Pais while employed as an aerospace engineer with the Naval Air Station Patuxent River, describes a craft that reduces its own inertial mass and gravitational mass using high-frequency electromagnetic fields. Not thrust, not lift, not any force acting on the craft from the outside. The claim is that the craft itself interacts differently with space-time by generating the right kind of electromagnetic envelope around its hull. To understand why that's extraordinary, think about what inertia actually is. Inertia is resistance to change in motion. It's why you feel pressed into your seat when a fighter jet accelerates, and why a hard turn at high speed can kill a pilot. The body can't handle the G-forces the maneuver generates. Every aircraft ever built has had to work around inertia. You can't make it go away, so you build airframes that handle stress, and you train pilots to survive what the physics demands. Inertial mass reduction doesn't work around that problem. It removes it. A craft with near zero inertia could change direction without decelerating first. It could accelerate from a dead stop to hypersonic speed without the crushing G-load that would turn a human crew into paste. It wouldn't need aerodynamic control surfaces because it wouldn't be fighting air resistance the way a conventional aircraft does. And because it's not compressing air ahead of it through brute thrust, it wouldn't generate a sonic boom. Watch the Pentagon released footage of the Tic Tac encounter from 2004 again with that in mind. The object, tracked by the USS Nimitz's radar systems and visually confirmed by multiple pilots, made a reported instantaneous directional change with no deceleration signature, no turn radius, no energy bleed. Commander David Fravor, the pilot who intercepted it, described it accelerating away faster than anything he'd ever seen, then disappearing entirely. That's not a description of thrust-based propulsion. That's a description of something that simply isn't playing by the same inertial rules. Pais also filed a companion patent called the High-Frequency Gravitational Wave Generator, describing hardware capable of manipulating gravitational waves directly. Patent examiners don't rubber stamp filings like this. When the Navy's patent office initially pushed back, the Navy responded in writing, arguing the technology was operable and that the US needed the patent approved to maintain technological advantage over China. That response is part of the public record. Companies file speculative patents. That happens constantly in aerospace, but they don't typically write letters to their own patent office defending the operability of a gravitational wave generator on national security grounds unless something beyond speculation is already on the table. These documents aren't fringe material. They're filed in a federal database, reviewed by government examiners, and defended by a branch of the U.S. military. Whatever they describe, someone decided it was worth protecting. The patents describe what the propulsion system would do. The question is where you'd actually build and fly it. There's a stretch of southern Nevada that the U.S. government doesn't officially discuss in any operational detail. Groom Lake, the Tonopah Test Range, the Nevada Test and Training Range. Together they form a corridor of restricted airspace so large and so consistently enforced that civilian aircraft are rerouted around it by default. The infrastructure out there isn't just runways, it's hangars built into mountainsides, radar installations with no public designation, and a workforce that commutes on unmarked aircraft out of a private terminal at Las Vegas McCarran. This is the same corridor where the U-2 first flew in 1955, the SR-71 in 1964, and the F-117 in 1977. None of those programs were publicly acknowledged for more than a decade after first flight. The U-2 alone generated a documented spike in UFO reports across Nevada in the late 1950s because a silver-skinned aircraft flying at 70,000 feet above the ceiling of every known commercial and military aircraft at the time looked like nothing anyone had a reference for. The CIA later confirmed this in a declassified history of the U-2 program. The pattern is consistent. Skunk Works flies something nobody can explain. The sighting reports pile up, and the official explanation comes a decade or two later when the program is either compromised or too old to protect. That timeline argument matters when you look at where we are now. If a craft using mass reduction propulsion entered testing in the mid-2000s, and the classified aerospace pipeline historically runs 10 to 20 years ahead of public acknowledgement, the program wouldn't be anywhere near a public reveal yet. Bob Lazar claimed in the late 1980s that he worked at a facility called S4 near Papoose Lake, south of Groom Lake, on a craft that used what he described as gravity wave propulsion. His credentials have never been fully verified, and his account has real credibility problems. But the specific propulsion mechanism he described, a high-frequency field interacting with space-time to move a craft without conventional thrust, maps closely to what the PI's patents formally describe on paper, filed roughly 30 years after Lazar first went public. That's either a strange coincidence or the public description eventually caught up to what someone already knew. The pilot testimony adds a geographic thread that's harder to dismiss. The 2004 U.S. Nimitz encounter happened off the coast of Southern California. The objects tracked by the ship's radar were descending from 80,000 feet to near sea level in seconds, then accelerating away at speeds the ship's systems couldn't track conventionally. Several pilots reported the objects seemed to anticipate their intercept approach before they'd close the distance. After the encounter, radar operators tracked one of the objects heading inland, toward the Nevada Test Corridor. The 2015 USS Theodore Roosevelt encounters, documented in the leaked FLIR and gimbal videos, showed objects with no visible exhaust plume, no control surfaces, and the ability to hold position against 120-knot winds before accelerating without any visible thrust signature, operating in both air and water with no transition signature between the two. No thrust-based aircraft in the public inventory does any of that. The classified aerospace pipeline has a documented, verified history of running well ahead of what anyone outside those programs knows exists. There's no evidence that gap has closed, and some evidence it's wider than it's ever been. Most people assume that if inertial mass reduction were real, mainstream physics would know about it. The assumption is that nothing this significant could exist in the scientific literature without getting flagged, studied, and either confirmed or killed. The thing is, the theoretical foundation is already in the literature. It's just spread across papers that don't get read outside of graduate physics programs. Start with general relativity. Einstein's equations don't forbid space-time curvature around an object. They describe it. In 1994, a physicist named Miguel Alcubierre published a metric showing that a region of space-time could, in principle, be compressed in front of a craft and expanded behind it, moving the craft through space without the craft itself accelerating in the conventional sense. The object inside the bubble wouldn't experience inertia in the normal way, because locally it wouldn't be moving at all. The space around it would be doing the work. The original problem with the Alcubierre metric was energy. Early calculations put the requirement at something equivalent to the mass energy of Jupiter, which made the whole thing a thought experiment with no engineering pathway. But subsequent revisions brought that number down considerably, and more recent theoretical work has continued to reduce the estimated requirements. The goalposts have been moving in the right direction for 30 years, which isn't how failed physics usually behaves. Now layer in what Pius was describing at the engineering level. The mechanism in his patents isn't a warp bubble in the science fiction sense. It's a rapidly rotating, high-frequency electromagnetic field generated around the hull of the craft, designed to interact with what physicists call the quantum vacuum. Every point in space, even a perfect vacuum, contains fluctuating energy at the quantum level. That's not a theoretical abstraction. It's the explanation for the Casimir effect, which you can demonstrate in any well-equipped lab. Two uncharged metal plates placed close together in a vacuum will move toward each other because quantum fluctuations push them. Nobody disputes this. It's reproducible and measurable, and it tells you that empty space isn't actually empty. What Pius claimed is that a sufficiently intense, rotating electromagnetic field could interact with that quantum vacuum energy in a way that effectively reduces the inertial and gravitational mass of the object generating the field. The craft wouldn't be pushing against space, it would be changing how space responds to it. The Navy's decision to defend that patent in writing is what separates this from 100 other speculative filings. When the patent examiner initially rejected the high-energy electromagnetic field generator application on the grounds that it violated known physics, the Navy's chief technology officer wrote back stating that the inventor had already demonstrated a working prototype. That letter is part of the public record. Whether the prototype did what the patent claims at full scale is a different question, but a branch of the US military put its name on the assertion that the underlying effect was real and reproducible. The honest position on the physics is this: the gap between the Casimir effect and a flying craft that rewrites inertia is genuinely enormous. The engineering problems between a lab demonstration and an operational propulsion system are not trivial, but the theoretical chain from proven quantum vacuum effects to the mechanism Pius described is not broken. It's incomplete, with some steps that current public physics can't fill in. And black programs with decades of runway and classification levels that prevent peer review are precisely where incomplete physics goes to become something else entirely. Pull the three threads together in one picture forms that's harder to wave away than any single piece of it. The patents are real, filed by a credentialed Navy engineer, defended in writing by the Navy's own technology office on national security grounds. The test infrastructure in Nevada is real, with a documented history of running classified aerospace programs a decade or more ahead of anything the public was told existed. The physics has a legitimate, if incomplete, theoretical foundation that connects to effects already demonstrated in controlled lab settings. None of those three things proves an operational craft, but they also don't exist in isolation. They point in the same direction. The UAP disclosure process has been managed so carefully and so slowly that the management itself tells you something. When the government genuinely doesn't know what it's looking at, it tends to say so loudly and immediately because that triggers threat assessments and budget requests. What it doesn't do is sit on sensor footage for years, release it through back channels, and then spend another several years acknowledging the footage is authentic while refusing to discuss what the objects actually are. That's not the behavior of an institution that's confused. That's the behavior of one that knows the answer and is deciding how much of it to give up. The counter-argument worth taking seriously is the prior art argument. China's aerospace and defense research institutions have been publishing work on high-frequency gravitational wave applications in electromagnetic propulsion since the early 2000s. Some of the Pius filings may have been as much about staking intellectual territory against Chinese patent activity as they were about documenting hardware that already flew. Patent strategy and operational reality aren't the same thing, and it's worth holding both possibilities at once. What's still not confirmed? No public source has produced a verified photograph of a prototype. No whistleblower account has been corroborated by physical evidence that's cleared independent scrutiny. The physics between a Navy letter defending a patent and an aircraft that genuinely manipulates inertia still contains gaps that published science hasn't closed. Those are real limits on this argument, and pretending otherwise would make the whole case weaker, not stronger. What the convergence of these specific documents, this specific geography, and this specific pilot testimony adds up to is a pattern too precise for coincidence and too incomplete for certainty. That's an uncomfortable place to land, but it's the honest one. The paper trail is real. The test ranges are real. The physics has a foundation, even if the ceiling is still classified. What's missing is the part that never gets declassified until it's already obsolete or already compromised. The patent numbers are in the description. Search them yourself, read the Navy's own defense of them, and decide what you think they were actually protecting. Deep underground, behind dozens of meters of solid rock, Iranian scientists believed they'd found the perfect shield. The logic seems sound. No air force in the world could reach them down there. But here's what they got wrong. The deeper you bury a nuclear program, the more precisely the US military has learned to target it. What we're going to show you is the weapon system built specifically to solve that problem, and why no bunker Iran can realistically build or operate will keep its program safe. The bunker strategy, why Iran went underground. Iran didn't decide to go underground on a whim. It watched what happened to Saddam Hussein's nuclear ambitions after the Israeli strike on Osirak in 1981. And it watched what happened to Libya's Gaddafi after he gave up his weapons program and was removed anyway. The lesson Iran took from both of those situations was simple. If you want a nuclear program to survive, you can't leave it sitting on the surface where anyone with a GPS coordinate and a large enough bomb can reach it. So Iran started digging. The most well-known result of that strategy is Fordow. It sits near the city of Qom, carved into the rock of a mountain rather than simply buried beneath flat ground. The Iranians chose that site deliberately. The mountain itself adds protection that poured concrete alone can't replicate. At reported depths of around 80 to 90 meters below the surface, the facility was designed from the start with one specific threat in mind: American and Israeli air power. The thinking behind it is straightforward physics. The deeper a structure sits, the more material a warhead has to pass through before it reaches anything worth destroying. At 80 meters of rock and reinforced concrete, you're outside the reach of almost every conventional airdrop weapon ever built. Iran's engineers knew the specifications of the munitions that existed when Fordow was being constructed, and they built accordingly. But depth wasn't the only layer of the strategy. Iran deliberately spread its nuclear work across multiple sites: Natanz for centrifuge operations, Arak for a heavy water reactor, Isfahan for uranium conversion, and Fordow for the enrichment work considered most sensitive. The logic of dispersal is that any adversary planning a strike has to hit all of them simultaneously, or accept that whatever they don't hit will survive and continue operating. Miss one, and the program lives. There's also the political dimension to dispersal. Striking a single facility can be framed as a limited, targeted operation. Striking 6 or 8 sites scattered across a country the size of Iran starts to look like a war, and that calculus has historically made Western governments hesitant to act. For years, that combination, depth plus dispersal plus political complexity, gave Iran genuine protection. Defense analysts in Washington and Tel Aviv debated openly whether Fordow was simply out of reach. Some concluded it was. The Iranians were following that debate closely, and what they heard gave them confidence the strategy was working. What they didn't fully account for was that the US military was following the same debate, drawing the opposite conclusion, and quietly funding the answer. That answer didn't come from diplomacy. It came from a weapons program that had been running in the background for years, built around a single question. What does it take to reach a target that conventional munitions simply cannot touch? The weapons built to answer the bunker, the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, doesn't have a subtle name, and it wasn't designed for subtle work. It weighs 30,000 pounds. To put that in context, that's roughly the weight of 2 full-grown African elephants, packed into a single weapon and dropped from altitude at high speed. The U.S. Air Force developed it for one purpose: reaching targets that nothing else in the arsenal could touch. The way it does that comes down to engineering that looks almost crude until you understand the physics. The outer casing is hardened steel, thick enough to survive the violent deceleration of punching through rock and reinforced concrete without the weapon breaking apart before it reaches its target depth. Inside, a delayed fuse gives the warhead time to travel down through the layers of material before it fires. The result is a weapon that can penetrate more than 60 meters of reinforced concrete and considerably more in softer ground before the 5,300-pound explosive fill detonates in whatever space it's reached. That number matters. 60 meters of reinforced concrete is a different problem than 60 meters of mountain rock, and the distinction is worth holding on to because it becomes important when we get to Fordow specifically. The only aircraft in the U.S. inventory capable of carrying the MOP is the B-2 Spirit, and it carries 2 of them. That's not a limitation of the aircraft so much as a reflection of how big the weapon actually is. The B-2's bomb bay was modified specifically to accommodate the MOP, meaning the Air Force committed real money and engineering time to making this delivery possible. You don't do that for a contingency plan. You do that because someone made a decision that this capability needed to exist and be ready. The MOP didn't appear from nowhere. It was preceded by the GBU-28, which became famous during the Gulf War in 1991. A 5,000-pound weapon that could punch through about 6 meters of concrete. At the time, that was enough to threaten the bunkers Saddam Hussein was using. But as Iran and North Korea watched that conflict and started building their own underground infrastructure, they built deeper. The GBU-28 stopped being a credible threat to the facilities they were constructing. The gap between what the U.S. could deliver and what adversaries were burying kept widening through the 1990s and into the 2000s. The MOP program was the direct institutional response to that gap. Congressional documents from the mid-2000s name Iran and North Korea explicitly as the threat scenarios driving the weapons development. The U.S. government wasn't being subtle about what this was for. The MOP reached operational status around 2011, and the Air Force has continued refining it since. At least 2 upgrade programs have improved its guidance systems and fusing to address specific feedback about penetration, performance against particular soil and rock compositions. That last detail is worth sitting with. The upgrades weren't generic improvements. They were responses to specific target characteristics, which means U.S. planners have been modeling Fordow and facilities like it in enough detail to identify exactly what adjustments the weapon needed to defeat them. The MOP wasn't just built to reach underground facilities in general. It was progressively refined to reach the specific ones that matter most. Penetration depth alone, though, is only part of the equation. Getting a 30,000-pound bomb to the right coordinate over defended territory without being shot down before it releases, that's a separate problem entirely, and it required a separate solution. Delivery, precision, and the platforms that make it work. The B-2 Spirit is the reason any of this works. Without a platform that can carry the MOP into defended airspace and release it accurately, the weapon is just an engineering achievement sitting in a hangar. Stealth is what converts that engineering into an actual military option. The B-2's radar cross-section is roughly the size of a large bird, a product of its flying wing shape, radar-absorbent surface materials, and the careful internal routing of engine exhaust to reduce heat signatures. Iranian air defenses are built around radar. They need to detect, track, and engage an incoming aircraft in a sequence that takes time. The B-2 breaks that sequence at the first step. If the radar can't produce a reliable track, the missiles that depend on that track can't fire effectively. The aircraft reaches its release point, drops its payload, and exits before the defense system has resolved what it was looking at. Precision is the other half of that equation. The MOP uses a combination of GPS guidance and an inertial navigation system that runs independently in case GPS signals are jammed or degraded. Together, they put the weapon within a few meters of its target coordinate. And that accuracy is what makes sequential strikes possible. You can drop the first weapon into a specific entry tunnel, then drop the second through the hole the first one created, driving the destruction progressively deeper into the structure. That's not a theoretical concept. It's a documented strike methodology the Air Force calls reattack, and it was specifically developed to address cases where a single pass isn't sufficient to guarantee destruction. But before any weapon leaves the aircraft, intelligence has to do its work. ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, is what tells planners where exactly to aim. Satellites, signals collection, and aerial reconnaissance over years of observation have produced detailed models of facilities like Fordo, where the access tunnels enter the mountain, where the ventilation shafts run, where the power infrastructure connects, and where the internal chambers sit relative to the surface above them. Dropping a weapon accurately onto a coordinate is simple. Knowing which coordinate to give it, the one that collapses the right tunnel or severs the right shaft, is the product of years of collection work. The weapon and the intelligence system feeding it are inseparable. Now factor in the B-21 Raider, which has entered operational service and carries the same heavy payload capability as the B-2. The B-21 was designed with lessons from decades of stealth operations folded into its architecture from the start, rather than retrofitted over time. Its manufacturing approach also means the Air Force can build more of them at lower cost, which changes the calculus around how many aircraft are available for a given mission. The B-2 fleet is small, 20 aircraft total, and not all of them are mission-ready at any given time. The B-21 is intended to grow that number considerably. More aircraft means more simultaneous strike packages, which matters directly for the dispersal problem Iran built its program around. The more sites you can hit at once, the less the dispersal strategy protects. Iran's engineers designed Fordo with the threat environment of the early 2000s in mind. The delivery systems flying today are a generation past what those engineers were modeling, and the generation coming next is further still. The physics problem Iran can't solve. Here's the constraint that no amount of concrete or political maneuvering can fix. The deeper you bury a facility, the harder it becomes to actually run one. Enrichment centrifuges are precision instruments. They spin at tens of thousands of rotations per minute and require stable power, stable temperature, and constant maintenance. The deeper underground you place them, the more complex and expensive the infrastructure keeping them alive becomes. Ventilation shafts to remove heat, power lines running down from the surface, supply tunnels wide enough to move equipment in and out. Every one of those systems is a structural dependency. Sever the ventilation and the facility overheats. Cut the power and the centrifuges stop. Collapse the access tunnel and no one gets in or out. The mountain protects the facility from above, but it also creates a set of choke points that a sequenced strike package is specifically designed to exploit. That's the part of bunker busting that rarely gets discussed. It isn't just about driving a warhead through the roof. A coordinated strike targets the tunnel entrances, the ventilation outlets, and the external power nodes in a sequence that leaves the interior intact but completely inoperable. A facility that survives a strike in that condition is still offline for months, possibly years, while the damage is assessed and the infrastructure rebuilt. From a military planning perspective, that outcome is nearly as good as destruction because the time it buys is the point. Now apply that to Fordo specifically. The facility sits at a depth where the MOP's penetration capability against the rock composition of that mountain sits at the edge of what's publicly confirmed. And US officials have acknowledged that tension openly, then pointed to the upgrade programs that followed. What those upgrades addressed, based on what's been reported, was exactly that margin. The weapon was improved to close it. Iran's engineers face a dilemma with no clean exit. Push the facility deeper to stay ahead of penetration capability, and you make the operational problems worse. Longer ventilation shafts, longer supply lines, more surface infrastructure that satellites can image and strike packages can target. Stay at current depth and accept that the MOP, delivered accurately and sequentially, puts the facility at genuine risk. There's no depth that solves both problems at once, because the geological constraints that limit what a bomb can reach are the same constraints that limit what an engineering team can build and sustain. The bunker was always a bet that the weapons pointed at it would never quite catch up. That bet is no longer paying out. Where this leaves Iran, no underground facility survives indefinitely against an adversary with the will to use what it has built. That's not a political statement. It's the operational conclusion that falls out of the physics and the engineering on both sides. Iran's nuclear timeline has always been shaped by diplomacy, sanctions, and internal politics. What's changed is that the military dimension now adds a hard constraint that those other factors can't negotiate around. The US has the weapon, the platform, the intelligence picture, and a demonstrated willingness to act when it judges the moment right. Israel has struck Iranian assets before and has been explicit about what it will not accept. Both of those realities exist independent of whatever is happening at the negotiating table. The bunker gave Iran's program survivability it didn't have before. What it didn't give Iran was a permanent solution. It gave the program more time. And time, in this context, is running out faster than the mountain overhead would suggest. The bunker was Iran's answer to air power, and the MOP was America's answer to the bunker. That exchange is effectively over, and only one side came out ahead. A $35,000 drone has changed the course of modern warfare in ways few anticipated. Iran spent years developing a weapon that struck fear across the Middle East. Affordable, relentless, and deployed in overwhelming numbers. Then the United States executed an unprecedented strategy. It captured the very same drone, rebuilt it, stamped it, made in America, and turned it against its creators. How can a nation's own weapon be used against it? And what does this mean for the future of war? Join us as we reveal how the United States just cloned Iran's most feared drone and how it changes everything. For years, the United States military operated with one unspoken assumption, that raw technological superiority would always be enough. The idea that a drone costing roughly the same as a used car could challenge that dominance seemed almost laughable. America had stealth fighters that cost over $100 million each. It had cruise missiles that could thread a window from 1,000 miles away. It had aircraft carriers that projected power across entire oceans. The notion that a cheap, propeller-driven flying bomb could threaten any of that seemed almost absurd. Then came the Shahed. Iran's Shahed 136 is not an impressive machine on paper. It is a delta-winged, propeller-driven drone with a small warhead and no pilot. It does not evade radar with cutting-edge stealth coatings. It does not fire back when attacked. It flies relatively slowly at low altitude, guided by GPS coordinates to a pre-programmed target. And when it arrives, it explodes. That is the entire concept. There is no recovery. There is no second mission. The drone is the weapon, and the weapon is expendable. And yet this relatively unsophisticated drone did something that billion-dollar weapon systems could not. It broke the economics of modern air defense. And once it broke them, nothing in the calculus of modern warfare was ever quite the same again. To understand why the Shahed was so strategically disruptive, you have to understand how air defense economics work. Every air defense system operates on a basic principle. The cost of intercepting an incoming threat must be justified by the value of what you are protecting. For most of military history, that equation made sense. Incoming missiles and aircraft were expensive to build and operate, so spending $1 million to shoot one down was rational. The attacker was losing something valuable every time they fired. The defender was spending money, but so was the attacker. The Shahed shattered that logic completely. When Russia began deploying Iranian-supplied Shahed drones against Ukraine in massive numbers, Western defense analysts watched in quiet horror. Not because the drones were destroying targets with pinpoint precision, but because of what it was costing to stop them. Ukraine and its allies were firing Patriot interceptors worth over $1 million each to destroy drones that cost somewhere between $20,000 and $50,000 to build. The attacker was spending a fraction of what the defender was spending. Every single engagement was a financial victory for Iran and Russia, regardless of whether the drone hit its target or not. The Shahed did not need to be accurate. It needed to be plentiful. And it was. Thousands of them were produced, deployed, and launched, attacking from multiple directions simultaneously. They flew at night to complicate visual detection. They flew low to complicate radar detection. They forced defenders to make impossible choices at every engagement. Exhaust your interceptor stockpile or let them through and accept the damage. Either way, the attacker benefits. This was the strategic lesson that shook every major military on Earth. The United States military studied this lesson very carefully. Defense analysts wrote about it. Think tanks published reports on it. The War Zone, one of the most respected military publications in the country, had been arguing for years that America needed to be building tens of thousands of Shahed clones immediately. The logic was simple and uncomfortable. If this strategy works against us and our allies, we need to be able to use it too. And we need to be able to use it at scale. And then America did exactly that. The low-cost, uncrewed combat attack system, known as Lucas, is the American answer to the Shahed 136. And the connection between the two is not subtle or theoretical. It is direct, deliberate, and openly acknowledged. American officials have described the process without apology. The United States captured one of Iran's Shahed drones, extracted its internal components, sent them back to engineers in the United States, rebuilt the system from the ground up using American manufacturing and American technology, added significant upgrades, and then deployed it against the very country that designed the original. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper put it in terms that left no room for interpretation. He told reporters that the United States captured the Iranian drone, pulled the guts out, sent it back to America, put a Made in America stamp on it, brought it back, and started shooting it at the Iranians. That is not a paraphrase. That is the admiral in charge of the entire Iran campaign, describing the program with remarkable candor at a press conference in Tampa, Florida. The drones are manufactured by SpectreWorks, a company based in Phoenix, Arizona. Each unit costs approximately $35,000. A Tomahawk cruise missile costs between $2 million and $2.5 million per shot. An air-launched cruise missile currently in service costs over $1 million. For the price of a single Tomahawk, the United States can now field over 50 Lucas drones. But Lucas is not simply a cheaper version of America's existing weapons. It represents a fundamentally different philosophy about what a weapon is supposed to be and how it is supposed to be used. Traditional American military doctrine has always been built around the principle of preservation. The entire procurement culture of the American military is built around the idea that each platform is a precious, irreplaceable asset. Lucas, however, inverts that logic entirely. These drones are designed from the start to be expended. They are not supposed to come back. The goal is to produce them so quickly and so cheaply that losing one in combat is strategically irrelevant. Defense planners call this concept attritable systems, platforms that are deliberately designed and accepted to be used up in combat. It is a radical departure from how the United States has approached weapons procurement for generations, and it reflects a hard-won recognition that in a conflict against an adversary willing to absorb enormous losses, the ability to match volume matters as much as the ability to field superior technology. The upgrades that America added on top of the Iranian original make Lucas significantly more capable than the weapon it was modeled after. The differences are not cosmetic. They are operationally transformative. Where the Shahed 136 flies a fixed GPS route to a pre-programmed coordinate and strikes whatever happens to be there when it arrives, Lucas operates in an entirely different tactical dimension. Multiple Lucas drones can communicate with each other while airborne. They can share sensor data, coordinate their approach vectors, and adjust their targeting based on what other units in the swarm are detecting in real time. This is autonomous cooperative behavior among multiple drones executing a shared mission. Some units in the fleet are equipped with Starlink satellite terminals, giving them beyond line-of-sight connectivity that allows targeting information to be updated while the drone is already in flight toward its objective. A Lucas drone can be launched, fly for hundreds of miles, receive updated coordinates mid-mission, and redirect itself to a new target without any human physically controlling it from moment to moment. The human remains in the loop in terms of authorizing the mission and approving the target list, but the execution is autonomous. The original Shahed was a blunt instrument designed for volume. The American version is a precision instrument that also happens to be available in volume. Lucas drones can be launched from multiple platforms, catapult systems on the ground, vehicle-mounted mobile launchers, and critically, from ships at sea. They were test-launched from the Independence-class littoral combat ship USS Santa Barbara in the Persian Gulf before they ever saw combat. That naval launch capability is strategically significant. It means Lucas is not dependent on fixed airstrips that can be targeted and destroyed. It can be deployed from almost anywhere across a vast operating area, which makes the launch infrastructure itself extraordinarily difficult to suppress. CENTCOM established Task Force Scorpion Strike in December of 2025, following directives from War Secretary Pete Hegseth to accelerate the acquisition and deployment of cost-effective drone technology. It was the first squadron in American military history dedicated entirely to one-way attack drones. The mission was straightforward: provide affordable, rapidly deployable offensive drone capability to commanders in the Middle East as quickly as possible. The first combat use of Lucas came during Operation Epic Fury, the joint United States and Israeli military campaign targeting Iranian assets that began in early March of 2026. Task Force Scorpion Strike used Lucas drones in the opening salvos of the campaign. They were fired at unspecified Iranian targets on the first day and used repeatedly in the days that followed. For the first time in history, American forces were using mass-produced, low-cost kamikaze drones in sustained combat operations, the same category of weapon that had been exclusively associated with Iran and Russia just years before. When asked directly how effective Lucas had been in combat and how much it was helping preserve the stockpile of more expensive munitions, Admiral Cooper gave a two-word assessment: indispensable. That single word from the commander of United States Central Command is worth dwelling on, meaning the campaign as conducted could not have been executed in the same way without it. When asked what kinds of targets Lucas had been used against, Cooper's answer was equally economical: good ones. The strategic impact of Lucas extends well beyond any individual strike or any single campaign. For years, one of the most serious concerns animating American military planning around a potential conflict with Iran was the question of magazine depth. Iran possesses thousands of drones and missiles. Producing enough expensive cruise missiles and interceptors to match that volume was economically and industrially unsustainable over a prolonged conflict. The fear was that Iranian barrages would outlast American and Allied stockpiles, forcing a choice between accepting devastating strikes or escalating beyond what the political situation could bear. Lucas has directly addressed that fear. Iran's response to all of this was as revealing as it was predictable. Rather than acknowledging that the United States had studied their approach and built a superior version of their own weapon, Iranian military officials pivoted to accusation. The spokesperson for Iran's Khatam al-Anbiya central headquarters publicly charged that America and Israel had copied the Shahed design and were deploying Lucas drones specifically to frame Iran for drone attacks across the region that they themselves were carrying out. The allegation was elaborate. Lucas was not a weapon aimed at Iran, but an impersonation designed to make Tehran look responsible for strikes it had nothing to do with. Consider what that accusation actually reveals beneath the political theater. Iran built a drone so effective, so distinctive in its design, and so thoroughly associated with Iranian military operations across the Middle East that when America built a near-identical version, Iran's instinct was not to acknowledge the imitation. Their instinct was to claim that America was using the similarity to commit fraud. That response tells you everything about how central the Shahed had become to Iran's sense of its own military identity. And it tells you everything about how completely Lucas had disrupted that identity. The U.S. Air Force has tried to retire the Warthog for years, but it is still flying combat missions today. Built in the 1970s, the Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt II is still flying combat missions in one of the most dangerous regions in the world, tracking fast-moving threats in the Strait of Hormuz. So how does a 50-year-old warplane stay relevant in the age of stealth jets and hypersonic weapons? And what is it doing today that modern fighters still can't replicate? Join us as we reveal why the Warthog refuses to disappear and how Iran is currently paying the price for that. Let us start with the sound, one of the things the Warthog is famous for. When an A-10 fires its cannon, the noise it makes sounds like the sky is tearing open. A deep, violent, mechanical roar that lasts less than 2 seconds but feels like it goes on forever. Pilots who have heard it from the cockpit describe it as unlike anything else in aviation. Ground troops who have heard it from below describe something closer to relief, the particular kind of relief that comes from knowing that whatever was about to harm you is no longer a threat. That sound is the GAU-8 Avenger, a 30mm rotary cannon that is not just a weapon mounted on an aircraft. It is the reason the aircraft exists in the first place. The A-10's entire airframe was designed around the GAU-8. The aircraft was built to carry that gun into battle, and every other design decision, the engines, the wings, the cockpit, and the landing gear were made in service of that central function. The GAU-8 fires at a rate of 3,900 rounds per minute. Its average recoil force is 10,000 pounds, which is slightly more than the thrust output of each of the A-10's two engines. The rounds it fires are accurate enough to put 80% of shots within a 40-foot diameter circle from 4,000 feet while the aircraft is in flight. In a world that increasingly debates whether human pilots are even necessary, where the conversation is dominated by stealth, hypersonics, and artificial intelligence, the A-10 is the most stubbornly analog weapon in the American arsenal. It flies low and slow. It gets close to things and shoots them with a cannon until they stop being a threat. That is not a philosophy that fits neatly into a PowerPoint about sixth-generation air dominance. But it turns out that philosophy is devastatingly effective in the specific conditions where Iran decided to pick a fight. To understand why the Warthog is in the Middle East right now, let's go back to the beginning and understand what this aircraft was actually built to do. The A-10 was born from a very specific fear. In the 1960s and 70s, American military planners looked at the Soviet Union's massive tank force and asked a deeply uncomfortable question. If the Red Army rolls into Western Europe, what stops it? The answer they arrived at was an aircraft designed from scratch to destroy armored vehicles as quickly and as cheaply as possible, in the most dangerous conditions imaginable, and then come home. The result was an aircraft with a titanium-armored cockpit nicknamed the Bathtub, redundant flight systems designed so the aircraft could continue flying after taking significant damage, and an airframe robust enough to return to base with one engine destroyed, one tail damaged, or significant wing damage. The Warthog was built to survive being hit and keep fighting anyway. During Desert Storm alone, A-10s destroyed over 900 Iraqi tanks, around 2,000 military vehicles, and nearly 1,200 artillery systems. It even reportedly shot down 2 Iraqi helicopters, a rare feat for a ground attack aircraft that carries no radar and was never intended for air-to-air combat. After Desert Storm came Kosovo, then Afghanistan, then Iraq again, then Libya, then Syria. Every time the military establishment declared the Warthog obsolete, another conflict arose in which it proved to be exactly the right tool for exactly the right job. The Air Force, for its part, has been trying to retire the A-10 for years. The argument is straightforward and not without merit. The aircraft is slow and non-stealthy, built for low-altitude attacks that become genuinely dangerous against modern air defenses, equipped with man-portable missiles and radar-guided guns. Advanced air defense systems from Russia and China can engage it long before it reaches its target. The Air Force argues that modern multi-role fighters equipped with precision-guided munitions can perform close air support from safer altitudes, and that the money spent maintaining an aging fleet of specialized aircraft would be better directed toward next-generation capabilities. The Air Force's fiscal year 2026 budget included a request for $57 million to retire all 162 remaining A-10s, 2 years ahead of schedule. The plan was clear. The Warthog was done. However, the Congress disagreed again. The fiscal year 2026 National Defense Authorization Act prohibited the Air Force from reducing the A-10 inventory below 103 aircraft and required at least 93 primary mission aircraft through September 30th, 2026. Any further reduction required a unit-by-unit waiver process, a 30-day notification period, and a multi-year transition plan covering 2027 through 2029, mandated by March 31st, 2026. Congress essentially looked at the Air Force's retirement plan and said no. Keep the Warthog flying. And then, less than 3 months later, Operation Epic Fury began, and the aircraft that was supposed to be in the process of being retired found itself in the opening wave of the largest American military campaign in the Middle East in over 2 decades. U.S. Central Command confirmed that a 10 Thunderbolt II aircraft were employed during the first 48 hours of Operation Epic Fury against Iranian targets, integrated into the initial strike wave from the very beginning of the campaign, not called in as backup, not deployed as an afterthought, in the opening salvos. The first official images CENTCOM released of the A-10 in action during Epic Fury told a story about the variety of threats it was being sent to handle. The aircraft were carrying a mixed loadout: AGM-65 Maverick air-to-surface guided missiles, LAU-131 rocket pods loaded with laser-guided rockets, AIM-9 Sidewinder air-to-air missiles for self-defense, a Lightning targeting pod for precision identification of targets, and a 600-gallon external fuel tank for extended loiter time. That loadout tells you something important about the threat environment in Epic Fury. The Maverick missiles are for armored targets and hardened positions. The laser-guided rockets are versatile precision weapons that can engage small, fast-moving threats at relatively low cost. The Sidewinders suggest the possibility of engaging Iranian drones in the air, which have become a significant threat across the region. And the 600-gallon fuel tank says that whoever loaded this aircraft expected it to stay airborne over the target area for a long time, ready to respond to whatever emerged. CENTCOM emphasized precisely this capability in the statement accompanying the A-10 imagery. The aircraft can remain on station for hours, standing ready to execute a mission whenever needed. That word, loiter, is the one that appears again and again in every discussion of why the A-10 remains relevant. Multi-role fighters can deliver more sophisticated weapons from greater distances, but they cannot circle over a target area for hours at a time, watching for threats to emerge, waiting for a boat to appear around a headland or a missile launch team to move positions. The A-10 can, and in the geography of the Strait of Hormuz, that capability proved decisive. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane confirmed at a Pentagon press conference that the A-10 Warthog is now engaged across the southern flank of Operation Epic Fury, hunting and killing fast-attack watercraft in the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most strategically important bodies of water on Earth. Roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply transits the strait. Iran has long maintained a strategy of threatening to close the strait to shipping in any serious conflict, using swarms of fast attack boats, mines, and coastal missiles to make passage too dangerous for commercial vessels. It is an asymmetric threat that does not require Iran to defeat the U.S. Navy in a conventional sense. It just needs to make insurance companies decide that sending tankers through the strait is too risky. The economic disruption that follows can be devastating for regional states, for global energy markets, and for any American effort to sustain regional alliances. Iran's fast attack boat strategy is built on numbers and speed. Small, fast vessels, difficult to track, appearing from coastal inlets and islands, capable of laying mines or firing missiles before air defense systems can respond effectively. Against an F-35 operating at altitude, these boats are genuinely hard to engage. They are fast, small, low on the water, and easy to lose against the radar clutter of a busy coastline. Against an A-10 flying low and slow at 300 knots with a targeting pod, a Maverick missile, and a pilot who has been training for exactly this scenario for years, they are not hard to find at all. The A-10 was specifically trained for the maritime role of hunting Iran's fast boat fleets long before Operation Epic Fury began. In early February 2026, A-10s were conducting close air support missions for the USS Santa Barbara in the Arabian Gulf as part of the force buildup ahead of the campaign, protecting mine-hunting operations in constrained waters near the strait from fast boat swarms and mining threats. In a March 16th video, CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper stated that U.S. forces had destroyed more than 100 Iranian naval vessels and vowed to continue rapidly depleting Iran's ability to threaten freedom of navigation in and around the Strait of Hormuz. 100 vessels, and the A-10 was actively contributing to that tally, not as a supplementary platform, but as one of the primary tools the U.S. military chose to clear the strait. A-10s were also spotted with Sidewinder missiles engaging Shahed-type Iranian drones during counter-unmanned aerial systems missions, an air-to-air role that nobody designed the Warthog for. but which pilots have adapted to over years of operational deployment in environments flooded with cheap Iranian drones. As the campaign expanded, flight tracking data revealed that the Air Force was preparing to send additional A-10s across the Atlantic toward the Middle East, with 12 aircraft arriving at RAF Lakenheath in late March 2026, suggesting a significant expansion of the Warthog's role in the campaign. The aircraft that the Air Force was actively trying to retire 6 months earlier was being reinforced mid-conflict. The debate about the A-10's future will continue after Epic Fury ends, but right now, somewhere over the Strait of Hormuz, an aircraft designed in the 70s to kill Soviet tanks is flying low over contested waters, scanning for Iranian fast boats, and making the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps pay for the mistake of thinking that cheap, swarming naval tactics could close the world's most important oil choke point without consequence. Somewhere over the Persian Gulf, an Iranian radar operator stares at a screen showing something that shouldn't exist. A contact moving faster than anything in their threat library, crossing their airspace at an altitude where the air is so thin it barely qualifies as atmosphere. They try to hold it. The track slips. They try again. And then it's gone. Out of range. Out of reach. Mission complete on the other end. They never got a lock. This is what happens when you point a missile system at an aircraft that operates outside the physics those systems were built around. Iran's air defense network is one of the most layered in the Middle East, and it still couldn't answer the problem. We're going to break down exactly why, what the SR-72 actually is, how Iran's defenses work, what went wrong during the encounter, and why the result was settled before the aircraft ever crossed the coastline. Most people hear SR-72 and think faster SR-71. That's the wrong mental model entirely. The SR-71 Blackbird was built around the idea of going fast enough that nothing could catch it. Mach 3 plus, high altitude, get in and get out. It worked for decades. But the SR-72 isn't an evolution of that concept. It's a different concept altogether. The thinking behind it is that speed itself becomes a weapon, not just a survival mechanism. There's a gap between those two ideas that matters more than it sounds. Lockheed's Skunk Works, the same team behind the U-2, the SR-71, and the F-117, developed the SR-72 around a propulsion system that doesn't exist anywhere else in operational aviation. It's a combined cycle engine, which means it runs as a conventional turbine at lower speeds and transitions to scramjet propulsion as it accelerates through the hypersonic regime. A scramjet has no moving parts and combusts fuel using air compressed purely by the vehicle's own velocity. Below a certain speed, it produces nothing. But past roughly Mach 4, it takes over and pushes the aircraft toward Mach 6, around 4,500 miles per hour at altitude. That number sounds abstract until you think about what it means for anyone trying to shoot the aircraft down. A surface-to-air missile doesn't fly at your target. It flies at where your target is going to be. The fire control system calculates a point in space. The missile heads for that point, and if the prediction is accurate, you get an intercept. That calculation depends on having enough time to run the math and enough track data to make the prediction reliable. At Mach 6, the SR-72 crosses a typical radar engagement zone in seconds. The fire control system has almost no data to work with, the prediction window collapses, and the intercept solution never solidifies. Speed at this level also works against detection in ways that aren't obvious. The aircraft runs hot. Hypersonic friction heats the airframe to extreme temperatures, but it also operates at altitudes near the top of the stratosphere, where most ground-based radar systems aren't optimized to look. The geometry of radar coverage has a ceiling, and the SR-72 operates close to it. That means the radar picture is already degraded before you factor in any low observable design features the aircraft carries. Now, the fair question the audience always asks, is the SR-72 actually operational, or is this still a program? The honest answer is that it lives in a gray zone. Lockheed has confirmed the program exists. The U.S. Air Force has referenced hypersonic reconnaissance capabilities without naming the platform. Operational deployment details are classified. That ambiguity isn't accidental. The uncertainty about where the aircraft is and what it can do is itself part of the deterrent. An adversary who doesn't know whether you're overhead right now has to behave as if you might be. Every air defense system flying today was designed before hypersonic cruise platforms became real. The SR-72 is the first aircraft that makes those systems structurally obsolete. So that's the machine. Now you need to understand what it was flying into. Iran didn't build its air defense network overnight, and it didn't build it cheap. What exists today is one of the most layered systems in the Middle East, assembled over decades from a mix of Russian hardware, domestically engineered platforms, and a command structure that ties them together across the country's most sensitive airspace, including the Gulf. The centerpiece of the Russian-supplied portion is the S-300. This isn't a simple radar-guided missile battery. The S-300 was engineered specifically to engage fast, high-altitude threats. Ballistic missiles, fast jets, low observable aircraft. It operates across multiple frequency bands, can track dozens of targets simultaneously, and was built with the assumption that any serious adversary would try to jam or spoof its guidance. Iran received its first operational S-300 systems in 2016 after a lengthy embargo, and has spent years integrating them into a unified command network with overlapping coverage zones. On paper, it's a serious capability. Then there's the Bavar 373. Iran developed this platform domestically, positioning it as their answer to the US Patriot system. Iranian military officials have claimed it can engage stealth aircraft and fast-moving cruise missiles. Independent verification of those claims is essentially impossible, but the engineering effort behind it is real, and the system has gone through multiple public test cycles. Whether it performs at its claimed ceiling in a contested environment against a real hypersonic target is a different question entirely. Beyond the missiles themselves, Iran runs an early warning radar network covering the Gulf approaches. Radar stations positioned across the southwestern coast and on islands in the Gulf give operators significant coverage of the maritime approaches, the same routes U.S. reconnaissance assets use regularly. Iranian operators have tracked American drones, monitored Israeli aircraft transiting the region, and logged cruise missile trajectories from multiple conflicts in the area. This is not a green crew running unfamiliar equipment. The people watching those screens have real operational experience. So why wasn't any of it enough? Air defense doesn't fail at one point, it fails across a chain. Detection, tracking, lock-on, and intercept are 4 separate steps, and every single one has to succeed for a missile to leave the rail with a valid solution. Miss any step or run out of time between them, and the sequence collapses. The S-300 and the Bavar 373 were both designed with threat models in mind. Specific speed ranges, altitude bands, and radar return profiles that their engineers used to tune the systems. Those threat models reflected real adversaries at the time of design. Mach 6 wasn't in the calculation, because nothing flying at Mach 6 existed when these systems were being built. That's not a criticism of Iranian engineers. It's a problem every air defense program in the world shares. Now put that system up against the SR-72, and here's where the encounter gets interesting. By 2026, the Persian Gulf region had been running hot for months. Strikes, counterstrikes, maritime incidents, and proxy activity across multiple fronts had pushed U.S. reconnaissance operations into a higher tempo. Knowing what's happening inside Iran's military infrastructure, where assets are moving, what's being activated, what's being concealed, carries enormous operational value when you're managing that kind of environment. The SR-72 went in to get that picture. Iranian early warning radar picked up the contact somewhere over the Gulf. What the operators saw didn't match anything in their reference library. The return was intermittent, appearing, dropping out, reappearing, and the velocity reading was beyond the scale of conventional fast movers they'd seen before. Not a cruise missile, which would track predictably and slowly enough to solve. Not a conventional aircraft. Something else, moving through their coverage zone at a speed that gave the system almost no time to build a track. Here's what that looks like from the operator's side. When a radar contact appears, the fire control system starts building a track, logging successive positions to calculate heading, speed, and predicted future location. That prediction is what guides the missile. The more track data you have, the more accurate the prediction. Against a Mach 6 target crossing a radar engagement zone, You might get 1 or 2 position updates before the aircraft is already past the point where any intercept geometry is viable. The fire control computer needs time to solve the problem. At that speed, time is the one thing the system doesn't have. Iranian operators attempted to establish a fire control lock. The radar couldn't hold the track consistently enough to hand off a valid firing solution to the missile system. The contact was intermittent because the SR-72's radar cross-section is reduced, not invisible, but small enough that a high-speed target with a weak return becomes extremely difficult to track continuously. Stack that on top of the altitude factor, which puts the aircraft near or above the optimal engagement ceiling for ground-based systems, and the intercept problem goes from difficult to geometrically unsolvable. No missile left the rail, not because someone made a political decision to stand down, but because the conditions for a valid shot never materialized. The SR-72 completed its reconnaissance run, collected what it came for, and exited the area. What remained in Iranian radar logs was a contact that had appeared, refused to cooperate with any of the systems pointed at it, and disappeared before anyone could do anything about it. That's what happened. Here's why it was always going to go that way. The SR-71 flew operational missions for more than 2 decades without a single aircraft lost to enemy fire. Not once. Adversaries launched missiles at it. North Korea, North Vietnam, Libya, and none of them connected. The reason wasn't that those missiles lacked the range or the altitude. Some of them did have both. The reason was that by the time a launch was authorized, the Blackbird had already moved far enough that the intercept geometry had fallen apart. Human decision-making takes time. Radar operators have to confirm the contact. A commander has to authorize weapons release. The missile has to be brought to readiness. That chain, even when it runs fast, takes longer than a Mach 3+ aircraft needs to exit the danger zone. The SR-72 runs at twice that speed. The decision chain doesn't get faster just because the target does. So what was already a narrow window for the SR-71 becomes, against the SR-72, essentially theoretical. You'd need to predict where the aircraft is going to be, authorize a shot, and launch, all before the target has moved so far that your solution is worthless. In practice, that sequence can't complete in time against a Mach 6 platform with a reduced radar return at high altitude. This is what the phrase "speed as a weapon" actually describes. It's not about surviving a missile that gets launched at you. It's about making sure the launch never happens, because the conditions for a valid shot never exist long enough for anyone to pull the trigger. The threat neutralizes itself through physics before it ever becomes a real danger. The geopolitical dimension of that is deliberate. When the US can send a reconnaissance platform into contested airspace, collect what it needs, and exit before any adversary finishes the engagement sequence, it changes the calculation for every country operating air defenses in the region. You can't deter something you can't stop, and you can't negotiate around a capability gap you don't know how to close. Iran's air defense operators did what they were trained to do. The equipment responded the way it was designed to respond. The failure wasn't human, it was structural, built into every assumption those systems were engineered around, years before the SR-72 existed. Speed at hypersonic levels doesn't just beat interceptors, it beats the people operating them, because humans can't compress their decision cycle fast enough to matter. Iran's attempt to lock on wasn't reckless, it was just physics working against them in every direction at once. No upgrade to the S-300 or the Bavar 373 closes that gap without solving a problem that no air defense program in the world has answered yet. Dozens of contacts, all moving fast, all closing on the same point. That's what the radar picture looks like when an Iranian drone swarm is inbound. Not one threat, not two, but a wall of cheap flying machines coming from multiple directions at once, each one designed to make sure the ship in front of them runs out of ways to fight back. 5 years ago, that was a real problem with no clean answer. Today it isn't, because somewhere in that engagement, a beam of focused light starts working through the swarm one drone at a time, and the drones just stop flying. No warning, no explosion at range. They just fall. Iran built its entire naval harassment strategy around a vulnerability that no longer exists. And that's the story we're getting into right now. Why Iran built a drone swarm strategy in the first place. To understand why this matters, you have to start with Iran's actual military situation, because Iran didn't build a drone swarm strategy because it wanted to. It built one because it had no other choice. Iran can't fight the US Navy head-to-head. That's not an opinion, it's just arithmetic. A US carrier strike group carries more air power than most countries' entire air forces. Iran's surface fleet is aging, its air force runs on decades-old American hardware, it can no longer get parts for, and its Navy doesn't have the blue water capability to project force beyond the Gulf. Conventional confrontation with the US would end badly and quickly, so Iran went a different direction. Instead of trying to match American capability dollar for dollar, they built a strategy around volume and cost. Send enough cheap things at a problem, and eventually the problem runs out of expensive solutions. The Shahed series drones are the heart of that approach. They're not sophisticated. They fly slow, they're relatively easy to detect on radar, and they don't have the kind of electronics you'd find on a military aircraft. What they have is price. A Shahed 136 costs somewhere in the range of $20,000 to $50,000 to produce. A standard missile intercept costs over $2 million. Send 20 drones at a ship and force it to fire 20 missiles, and you've just burned through $40 million worth of the enemy's inventory for under $1 million of your own. That's a trade Iran wins every time. And the strategy had real teeth. In 2019, drone and cruise missile strikes hit the Saudi Aramco processing facilities at Abqaiq and Khurais, knocking out roughly 5% of global oil supply overnight. The attack, in which US officials linked to Iranian hardware, showed the world that this wasn't theory. Cheap aerial munitions could reach high-value targets and cause serious damage before anyone could stop them. In the Red Sea, Houthi forces backed by Iranian weapons and training ran the same playbook against commercial shipping and US Navy warships for months. The USS Carney alone fired over 100 interceptor missiles in a single deployment period, defending against drone and missile attacks. 100 missiles. Gone. At sea, you can't just reload. A ship carries what it carries, and once the magazine runs low, the options get thin fast. That's the vulnerability Iran was targeting. Not the armor, not the sensors, not the crew, the inventory. Western navies are built around expensive precision weapons that you can only carry so many of, and Iran was betting it could keep sending cheap drones until those weapons ran out. For a while, the bet looked reasonable. Then the US Navy started putting a very different kind of weapon on its ships. What the US Navy's laser weapons actually are. The system the US Navy has been quietly putting on its surface ships is called Helios. High-energy laser with integrated optical dazzler and surveillance. USS Preble was the first destroyer to receive it, making her the first operational US surface combatant to carry a solid-state laser weapon. Not a prototype sitting in a lab, not a test rig on a barge, a combat-ready system mounted on a warship operating in real threat environments. The physics behind it are simpler than you might expect. Helios focuses a high-powered beam of light onto a target and holds it there. The energy transfers into the surface material as heat, and it keeps building until something fails. The airframe warps, the engine seizes, the fuel ignites, or the electronics fry. There's no warhead, no shrapnel, no projectile traveling downrange. Just a sustained column of thermal energy moving at the speed of light, delivered precisely where the fire control system points it. What that means in practical terms is a cost per shot figure that sounds made up until you look at how the system actually works. Each firing costs roughly $1 in electricity. That's it. Compare that to the missile intercept costs we already covered, and you start to see why the Pentagon kept pushing this program even when early versions underperformed. The magazine situation is what really separates this from every other weapon on the ship. As long as the ship's power generators are running, the laser can keep firing. There's no reload, no resupply run, no hard limit on engagements per sortie. In a prolonged drone harassment campaign, exactly the kind Iran has been running in the Gulf, that's not a minor advantage. It's a structural one. Helios also isn't a single-mode weapon. At lower power settings, the dazzler function can blind the optical sensors on a surveillance drone without destroying it. Useful when the rules of engagement require a measured response. Step up the power and you can disable propulsion systems or cook the electronics without the airframe coming apart. Go to full power and you're burning through the drone itself. The operator picks the effect, the system delivers it. Before Helios, the Navy was already fielding a lower power version called Odin, Optical Dazzling Interdictor, Navy. Odin went on multiple surface ships first, which gave the service real operational data on how directed energy performs outside a test range. Humidity, sea spray, atmospheric turbulence, all of it affects how a laser beam holds together over distance, and you can't simulate that in a lab. Odin gave the Navy years of that data before Helios ever went to sea. The limitations are real and worth stating plainly. Heavy rain or thick fog degrades beam quality significantly because the atmosphere scatters the energy before it reaches the target. The system also needs to hold its beam on a target for several seconds to achieve a kill, which means a target that's maneuvering hard at long range is harder to engage reliably. Against a supersonic anti-ship missile pulling high G turns, a laser at current power levels isn't your first line of defense. But slow, straight-flying drones on a fixed approach path? The dwell requirement barely matters. A Shahed flying a pre-programmed route at low altitude isn't doing anything to break the beam's lock. It's just flying in a straight line toward a ship that's now pointing something at it that doesn't miss and doesn't run out of ammunition. The encounter, laser versus drone swarm. Picture the scenario the US Navy has been wargaming for years. A destroyer operating in the Persian Gulf, well inside the range corridor Iran uses for its drone operations. The radar picture fills with contacts. Not one or two, but a coordinated wave coming in from multiple bearings at once. Some are high, some are skimming low over the water to complicate the tracking picture. This is the swarm profile Iran has rehearsed, and it's specifically designed to split a ship's defensive attention across too many targets simultaneously. Against a traditional layered defense, this is where things get ugly fast. The Phalanx close-in weapons system can engage incoming threats, but it covers a limited arc, burns through its 20mm ammunition quickly, and by the time drones are close enough for Phalanx to reliably engage them, you're already in a bad position. Standard missiles are accurate, but as we covered, there aren't unlimited rounds on board, and they're wasted on a $20,000 drone. Electronic jamming works against drones that rely on GPS or radio command links, but Shahed-type systems fly pre-programmed routes, cut the signal, and they just keep going. None of the traditional answers solve the volume problem cleanly. Helios approaches the same problem differently. The fire control system pulls track data from the ship's radar, assigns priority to the targets posing the most immediate threat, and the beam slews onto the first contact. Slew, dwell, kill, move. The mechanical turret repositions fast enough that the transition between targets takes a fraction of a second. There's no reload cycle between engagements, no cooldown that a swarm operator could try to exploit. The system works through the contacts sequentially, and the engagement rate is measured in seconds per drone, not minutes. The actual kill mechanism depends on where the beam holds. On a drone with a combustion engine, sustained heat on the fuel system or exhaust components can trigger ignition. On an electric UAV, the beam cooking through the fuselage reaches the battery pack or motor controller, and that's the end of the flight. Either way, the drone doesn't explode dramatically at distance, it just stops flying and drops. Sometimes there's a small fire on the way down, mostly it just falls. That last detail is something Iran's planners didn't fully account for, and it matters operationally. When a missile intercept happens, both sides know. There's a detonation, a debris field, a visible event that tells the attacking force its drone was stopped. The swarm operators can count intercepts, adjust, and keep pushing. With a laser kill, the feedback loop breaks down. A drone goes offline and the operators have no immediate way to know why. Signal failure, mechanical fault, or something they can't see burning through the airframe from 12 kilometers away. The swarm starts thinning, and the people who launched it don't have a clear picture of what's stopping it. US Navy testing has demonstrated exactly this capability against drone targets under operational conditions, and the service has publicly confirmed Helios is deployed and functional. The Red Sea operations didn't just validate the threat picture, They put directed energy systems into a genuine combat environment for the first time, generating data on real-world performance that no test range can replicate. What Iran's operators would actually experience on the receiving end of a Helios engagement is a swarm that starts losing units with no obvious cause. No contrails, no explosion at range, no radio intercept of a missile launch command. Just drones going silent, one after another, while the ship they were sent to overwhelm keeps sailing. The swarm thins, the attack fails. And somewhere in an Iranian operations room, someone's trying to figure out what just happened to their strategy. What this means for Iran's strategy going forward. The math Iran built its doctrine on has flipped completely. A dollar defeating a $20,000 drone isn't a minor economic inconvenience. It's the entire logic of the swarm strategy running in reverse. Iran needed the cost exchange to work in its favor, and now it doesn't. So what does Iran do next? There are a few options on paper, and none of them are good. The first is speed. If a laser needs several seconds of dwell time to achieve a kill, then a faster drone reduces the window the beam has to work with. In theory, you could build drones that cross the engagement zone quickly enough to limit damage. In practice, faster drones cost more to produce, require better propulsion systems, and burn more fuel, which cuts range. The whole point of the Shahid approach was disposable cheapness. The moment you start engineering for laser resistance, you're spending more per unit, which means you need fewer of them, which means the swarm gets smaller, which means the saturation strategy stops working. Reflective coatings are the other idea that gets floated. Certain materials can deflect or disperse laser energy rather than absorbing it. So coat the drone's surface, and maybe you reduce the beam's effectiveness. The problem is that materials capable of reflecting the specific wavelengths, military lasers operate at add weight, add cost, and require manufacturing precision that a mass production drone facility isn't set up for. You've turned a cheap, expendable weapon into an expensive, specialized one. And you've still only bought a few extra seconds of dwell time, not immunity. The saturation angle is the only one with any real logic to it. If you can't make each drone harder to kill, send enough of them that the laser can't work through the whole swarm before some get through. To do that, you need to know the system's maximum engagement rate, how many drones per minute it can cycle through, and then exceed it by a wide enough margin that some survive. The engagement rate for Helios is not public information. Iran would be building toward a number it can't verify, spending money on drone production at a scale that starts to undermine the cost advantage that made the strategy viable in the first place. Every Iranian naval commander and IRGC planner operating in the Gulf now has to factor in that any U.S. Navy destroyer they're looking at might be carrying a weapon with an effectively unlimited magazine. That changes targeting calculus, risk tolerance, and the whole harassment playbook Iran has been running for years. There's an irony buried in all of this that's worth sitting with. Iran's persistent drone pressure in the Gulf and the Red Sea, the harassment, the Houthi campaigns, the cost exchange problem that had Western navies genuinely worried. That pressure is a big part of why the U.S. moved so fast to get directed energy systems operational. Iran kept poking at the vulnerability, and the U.S. responded by closing it. The aggression that was supposed to stress American naval capacity may have done more to accelerate American laser development than any Pentagon budget cycle would have on its own. Iran spent years building a strategy around a math problem it thought the U.S. couldn't afford to fix. Then the U.S. fixed it for roughly $1 a shot. The upgraded F-22 Raptor is challenging global defense norms. With enhanced stealth, improved engines, and advanced sensor fusion, its air superiority is redefined. Critics warn these changes could trigger an arms race, while others argue it secures U.S. dominance. Meanwhile, China and Russia are investing in next-generation fighter technologies to lead the innovation race. As Beijing and Moscow ramp up their modernization efforts, the critical question remains: can the F-22 maintain its supremacy, or will emerging platforms like the F-47 usher in a new era of aerial warfare? Join us as we uncover the cutting-edge upgrades of the F-22 Raptor, advancements so powerful they've captured China's attention. The F-22 Raptor is one of the most advanced fighter jets ever built, but it didn't start out that way. It began as part of the U.S. Air Force's Advanced Tactical Fighter program in 1981. The goal was to replace the F-15 and F-16, which were powerful but becoming vulnerable to new Soviet threats. The Soviets were developing advanced missiles, airborne warning systems, and new fighters like the Su-27 and MiG-29, which could challenge U.S. air superiority. To stay ahead, the U.S. needed a fighter that was faster, stealthier, and more advanced. Engineers designed the ATF to dominate in a future war, using cutting-edge technology like lightweight materials, better flight controls, and engines that allowed supercruise. Sustained supersonic flight without using fuel-hungry afterburners. Most importantly, it had stealth capabilities, making it nearly invisible to enemy radar. After years of competition, Lockheed YF-22 won against Northrop's YF-23 in 1991. While the YF-23 was stealthier and faster, the YF-22 was more maneuverable thanks to its thrust vectoring engines, which allowed it to perform sharp turns and outmaneuver enemies in close combat. Lockheed's design also had fewer risks, making it the Air Force's top choice. Over the years, the F-22 has received multiple upgrades to keep it at the top of the game. Originally built for air-to-air combat, it has been enhanced to handle air-to-ground missions, with precision bombs, making it more versatile. Its avionics have been upgraded, including better radar and sensor fusion, allowing pilots to detect and track threats even more effectively. One of the biggest improvements is its stealth maintenance. When the F-22 first entered service, its stealth coatings required a lot of upkeep, but new materials have made it more durable and easier to maintain. This means less downtime and more time in the air, ready for action. The F-22's weapon systems have also been enhanced. It now uses improved AIM-9X Sidewinder missiles for short-range dogfights and AIM-120D AMRAAM missiles for long-range engagements. Additionally, new software upgrades have given it the ability to communicate better with other aircraft, improving its role in networked warfare. While the Air Force stopped producing the F-22 after building 186 jets, it has continued to receive technological upgrades. Some of these improvements come from lessons learned during the development of the upcoming next-generation air dominance fighter, and they have enhanced the fighter jet's ability to detect, track, and eliminate threats before they even know it's there. These technological upgrades have significantly strengthened one of the F-22's most critical advantages, its radar and sensor systems. The jet's AN/APG-77 radar allows pilots to spot enemy aircraft from extreme distances while staying undetected. This radar uses active electronically scanned array technology, which improves tracking and targeting while reducing the chance of being detected by enemy systems. Combined with powerful jamming capabilities, the F-22 can disrupt enemy communications and radar, making it even harder to counter. The F-22 doesn't just rely on stealth, it's also armed with some of the deadliest air-to-air weapons in the world. The AIM-120 AMRAAM missile is its primary long-range weapon, designed to engage enemy aircraft before they get close. For close-range combat, the AIM-9X Sidewinder offers unmatched agility, allowing the Raptor to take down threats even during high-speed dogfights. Additionally, the F-22 carries an M61 Vulcan 20mm cannon, a 6-barrel rotary gun capable of firing 6,000 rounds per minute. This provides a powerful backup for situations where missiles aren't an option. Speed and agility are key to the F-22's dominance. Its thrust vectoring nozzles give it unmatched control in the air, allowing it to perform maneuvers no other fighter can match. Whether it's executing high G turns, rapid climbs, or sudden dives, the Raptor can outmaneuver opponents with ease. This ability is critical in dogfights, where the slightest advantage can mean the difference between victory and defeat. Former pilots often describe flying the F-22 as effortless, with its advanced flight controls making complex maneuvers feel smooth and precise. This agility ensures the Raptor can engage and disengage at will, giving its pilots complete control over the battlefield. While the F-22 is already a technological marvel, ongoing software and hardware upgrades will keep it ahead of emerging threats. The F-3R, that is, Form, Fit, Function, Refresh program, is enhancing the aircraft's avionics, increasing its processing power and sensor capabilities. These improvements will make the Raptor even deadlier, allowing it to integrate with next-generation systems and unmanned drones in future combat scenarios. The Air Force is also working on engine enhancements to boost efficiency and power, ensuring the Raptor remains capable of supersonic speeds without afterburners. These updates will extend the F-22's operational life, keeping it in service for years to come. Last year, Lockheed Martin successfully ran 6 flight tests to add new high-tech features to the stealth fighter. The U.S. Air Force relies heavily on its fleet of F-22s, and these upgrades will help keep the jet at the top of its game, possibly all the way into the 2040s. Some of the biggest improvements include a new infrared defensive system, advanced sensors, and special stealthy drop tanks that extend its range. At the 2025 Air and Space Forces Warfare Symposium, Lockheed Martin shared updates about these developments. Right now, the Air Force has about 180 F-22s, though 32 of them are older models used only for training and testing. Mike Shoemaker, a top executive at Lockheed Martin, emphasized the significance of the upgrades, stating that modern fighter jets must have enhanced vision, quicker threat detection, and extended strike capabilities. He mentioned that recent flight tests had concentrated on integrating advanced sensors to improve the F-22 Raptor's ability to track and engage targets from much greater distances, significantly boosting its combat advantage. While Lockheed Martin didn't share specific details about these sensors, the Air Force has been testing stealthy underwing pods on the F-22 for years. Many experts believe these pods house an advanced infrared search and track system, which would allow the Raptor to detect enemy aircraft without using radar, perfect for staying hidden while hunting down threats. Another major improvement coming to the F-22 is its next-generation infrared defensive system. Mike confirmed that Lockheed Martin is already under contract to integrate this technology, which will give the Raptor better missile warning capabilities and long-range detection. In simple terms, this means the jet will not only be better at spotting enemies, but also at avoiding surprise attacks. Lockheed Martin previously revealed that IRDS will use a distributed sensor system based on TACRS-T technology, first introduced in 2022. TACRS-T sensors provide a constant infrared view of the battlefield, helping pilots detect and track threats, even in complete darkness. So far, these sensors have only been fully integrated into F-5 advanced Tiger jets used by private military contractors. Now they're making their way to the world's most advanced stealth fighter. Mike's comments confirm that the F-22's new advanced sensor upgrade is different from the infrared search and track distributed system. This suggests that the Raptor may get even more advanced infrared tracking capabilities. Adding an extra infrared sensor pod alongside IRDS makes sense. Traditional IRST systems, whether built into jets or carried as external pods, typically use large, swiveling sensors to track targets from different angles. TAC-IRST, the system being developed for the F-22, works differently. In 2017, Ken Merchant, a Lockheed Martin executive for the F-22 program, explained that there wasn't enough space inside the jet to install a full IRST system like the F-35's Electro-Optical Targeting System, or EOTS. EOTS mainly helps with air-to-ground targeting, but it also has infrared tracking capabilities. Even on its own, IRDS would be a huge improvement over the F-22's current ANAAR-56 missile launch detector, which only provides basic infrared warnings. TASI IRST sensors spread across the aircraft could help the Raptor detect threats more effectively, similar to how the F-35 distributed aperture system works. Using both built-in and podded IRST sensors together would be a game changer. As experts have explained, traditional IRST sensors can only detect a target's direction and movement, but struggle to determine its exact range. However, if two aircraft with IRST systems share data, they can quickly triangulate a target's position with precision. Lockheed Martin has already demonstrated this kind of teamwork using its Legion pod, which features an IRST-21 sensor. This system can provide high-quality targeting data and has been tested on various fighter jets. The F-22 was originally supposed to have an IRST system, but budget cuts removed it late in development. Now, with stealth technology becoming more common worldwide, the U.S. military sees infrared tracking as crucial. Unlike radar, which actively sends out signals that enemies can detect, IRST works passively. It simply listens for heat signatures, making it perfect for tracking stealth aircraft. IRST can also help radar systems lock onto targets more effectively, providing better accuracy without revealing the jet's position. One of the biggest advantages of IRST is that it's immune to electronic warfare. Modern enemy forces use jamming technology to disrupt radars, but infrared tracking can't be blocked in the same way. This makes IRST a powerful tool for detecting and tracking stealthy threats. Mike reassured that any new F-22 upgrades would maintain the aircraft's stealth capabilities. This is crucial as the U.S. faces increasing threats from advanced enemy aircraft and stealthy weapons. China, for example, recently unveiled 2 new stealth fighter designs, signaling rapid advancements in their air combat technology. He also emphasized the importance of detecting threats from greater distances in modern air combat. He explained that if an aircraft could sense and see farther, it would also be able to share that information with other units. The F-22 Raptor had already proven itself as one of the most advanced fighters, acting as a central coordinator for larger aerial teams. Mike noted that it could gather intelligence, guide other aircraft, and ensure air superiority. Lockheed Martin, alongside the U.S. Air Force and industry partners, had been working to enhance the Raptor's communication and networking abilities to further improve its role in battle. According to Lockheed Martin, the F-22 was the first combat aircraft to fully utilize an open mission systems architecture, which allowed for faster and easier software upgrades. This feature made the aircraft highly adaptable to new technologies. A major software update known as Release 4 was in its final testing phase. If everything proceeded as planned, the update would be available for the entire F-22 fleet by the end of the spring. He also pointed out that this upgrade would make it easier to integrate third-party applications into the aircraft's mission systems, enhancing its capabilities even further. When discussing the timeline for the Raptor's new sensor capabilities, Mike mentioned that they were expected to be delivered to the fleet within the next few years. In the meantime, he highlighted that the F-22 remained in high demand. It was also revealed that Lockheed Martin had been supporting increased operations and deployments despite the relatively small size of the F-22 fleet. He acknowledged the challenges of maintaining a fleet that had accumulated over 500,000 flying hours, but reassured that the aircraft would not require major structural upgrades to continue serving well into the 2040s. The long-term future of the F-22, however, remained tied to the Air Force's next-generation air dominance program. Originally designed to replace the Raptor, NGAD had undergone a detailed review the previous year. It was suggested that the analysis appeared to favor continuing the program as planned, although concerns about affordability persisted. Developing a next-generation fighter required significant funding, which had to be balanced with other military priorities, such as stealth refueling tankers and AI-powered drone wingmen, known as collaborative combat aircraft. Additionally, rising costs in the Sentinel intercontinental ballistic missile program had forced the Air Force to reassess its budget. Shoemaker also mentioned that discussions were still ongoing regarding the optimal size of the B-21 Raider stealth bomber fleet. Meanwhile, the Department of Defense was facing potential budget cuts to existing programs in order to redirect resources toward new priorities, including the Golden Dome missile defense system. Despite these uncertainties, Lockheed Martin remained confident in the F-22's continued importance. It was indicated that the aircraft's upgrades were already contributing to NGAD research, ensuring its relevance in modern air combat. However, as the U.S. Air Force moves forward with the next generation of fighters, a major shift is underway. The recent unveiling of the F-47, the Air Force's newest jet, marks a significant leap beyond the F-22, offering superior range, stealth, and cost-effectiveness. Air Force Chief of Staff General David W. Alvin, who spoke at a high-profile event alongside former President Donald Trump, revealed new details about this once-secret aircraft. Alvin reportedly stated that, despite claims from adversaries, the F-47 would be the first crewed sixth-generation fighter in the world. His comments were seen as a response to China, which had recently unveiled its own stealth aircraft. He explained that the F-47 would join the B-21 Raider stealth bomber in the Air Force's new fleet and would be equipped with advanced stealth technology, next-generation sensors, and long-range attack capabilities. These features, he noted, would make the aircraft highly effective in contested battle zones. Although the Air Force did not reveal all details about the F-47, the concept images released showed notable design differences compared to previous fifth-generation fighters like the F-22 and F-35. Observers noted that while the F-47 had a traditional, stealthy nose and bubble canopy, it also included forward canards and sharply angled wings, features not commonly associated with stealth aircraft. Alvin reportedly emphasized that the F-47 would have a significantly longer range than the F-22. The existing F-22 could fly more than 1,850 miles with external fuel tanks before needing to refuel, but the F-47 was expected to exceed that distance considerably. Discussions within the Air Force had suggested the possibility of producing two variants of the aircraft, one larger version designed for long-range missions, particularly in the Pacific, and another smaller version optimized for shorter-range operations in Europe. According to the Air Force, the F-47 represents a major leap forward and had been designed with a modular system that would allow it to be upgraded over time. Officials expressed confidence that this approach would ensure the aircraft remained effective for decades. Alvin further explained that for the past 5 years, the Air Force had been testing NGAD technologies using experimental X-planes. These test aircraft had flown hundreds of hours, helping engineers refine advanced systems and accelerate the development process. He stated that this extensive testing had allowed them to push the limits of technology and bring the fighter into service more quickly than previous programs. He also reportedly expressed confidence that the F-47 would be operational within former President Trump's administration, which would last until January 2029. Comparisons were made to the F-22, which took 6 years to progress from selection in 1991 to its first production flight. It was also noted that references to NGAD test flights had surfaced as early as 2020. However, former Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall had later revealed that prototype flights had likely taken place even earlier, possibly in the mid-2010s. One of the biggest issues with the F-22 was its cost. While the basic construction of each jet cost around $140 million, once research, development, and other expenses were included, the price soared to about $350 million per aircraft. Now, with the Next Generation Air Dominance program, the Air Force plans to field between 220 and 250 advanced fighters. The F-47, a product of this effort, is expected to be a game changer. Unlike older stealth aircraft, which required extensive maintenance to keep their radar-evading surfaces intact, the F-47 will feature a more durable design, reducing downtime and making it combat-ready more often. This design philosophy follows lessons learned from the new B-21 Raider bomber, which was built to fly frequently without excessive maintenance. The F-47 is also built for adaptability. Thanks to digital engineering and an open systems approach, its software, sensors, and mission equipment can be upgraded quickly and easily. It will also need fewer crew members and ground support to operate, making it more flexible in real-world missions. Boeing won the contract to develop the F-47, which will now enter its engineering and testing phase. Initially, a small number of test aircraft will be produced, with options for further production later. Boeing stated that this fighter will continue its legacy of building some of the most famous aircraft in U.S. history, including the P-51 Mustang, F-15 Eagle, and F/A-18 Hornet. The decision to select Boeing over Lockheed Martin was surprising to some. Boeing has faced issues with several military projects, such as the KC-46 tanker and T-7 trainer, resulting in significant cost overruns. Meanwhile, Lockheed, the maker of the F-22 and F-35, has struggled with delays in upgrading the F-35's technology and managing its high maintenance costs. However, the Air Force has not publicly shared the reasons behind its choice. Despite the debates surrounding the selection process, the Air Force remains focused on ensuring air superiority. The next generation fighter is expected to dominate the skies, keeping the U.S. ahead of threats for decades. Meanwhile, the F-22 will remain a key part of the USF's fleet, benefiting from upgrades until its eventual replacement by the Boeing F-47, ensuring continued air superiority well into the future. Thanks for watching. While you are still here, click on the link on your screen to check out another of our videos. See you there.